This week on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast, I'm talking about the upcoming presidential election and what that means for you and your retirement. And yes, I know I sound terrible. I have a cold, I'm just dealing with it. Okay, so today I'm looking at the election's implications for investors if Trump wins. Now, if you missed yesterday, I talked about some of the tax and policy, trade, regulatory changes that are likely to impact investors. And because this is a podcast about finances, I'm only focusing on policies here that are likely to have an impact on the economy and the markets. I'm not commenting on immigration, social implications, and drawing conclusions there. I'm looking at the things that are the most likely to impact the markets and the economy. Okay, so before I talk about the specifics of a Trump presidency, let's look at a couple of themes no matter the outcome. I touched on this yesterday. It's worth mentioning again today. Either president is likely to have a divided government with narrow party majorities, no matter the outcome. This is a good thing. So if you have a Republican president, like Trump's in the White House, and you have a strong Republican majority, or if the opposite is true, you have Harris in the White House and a strong Democratic majority, both of those combinations are not good for investors, for the markets and the economy, because what they're able to do is just plow through all of their policies and easily make sweeping changes. And that is not good. The markets do best historically, if you just look at performance, markets do best when there's a divided government. And that's because they have to work together. They have to actually consider what the vast majority of Americans want, just not what their side wants when pushing policies through, and something called compromise, which is rare in government today. So we don't want one party that has control in either direction, because that's not good. That's a positive thing and something I think is encouraging if whoever is elected president is not your choice. So I think that can be a little consoling there. All right, the next one that is unlikely to change under either candidate is that we'll see the national debt and the deficit that is expected to continue to increase under both presidents. Both of them in their proposals, the spending outpaces the revenue generation. So they're going to add to the deficit, add to the national debt, add to the printing presses of money, and it's likely to be inflationary. Now, this is a complicated issue, how we get out of this mess long term. But unfortunately, the American people and both parties have zero desire to deal with the problem of the national debt. Americans recognize that it's a problem, but at the same time, they're unwilling to do anything about it. And the same is true for politicians. So this is something that is not an immediate problem and will likely take years to play out. And we'll see how that looks, but it is concerning. Okay, so let's talk specifically about implications for investors for a Trump victory. Much of the information that I'm sharing with you is straight from the candidates themselves. This is policies that have been proposed if you go to their campaign websites, official campaign announcements, white papers, social media posts. I obtained this information from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. They're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization committed to educating the public on issues with significant fiscal impact. So let's look at the things that are likely to have the most impact fiscally on the economy, markets, etc., in a Trump victory. Probably the biggest difference between Trump and Harris in this area is tax policy. They both plan to blow out the spending, but how they pay for it differs. Harris plans to increase taxes. Trump primarily does this with tariffs. Now, problematically, the tariffs and rising taxes under either president don't actually cover the spending. So again, more deficits, more debt under either scenario. Harris would increase the corporate tax rate. President Trump wants to reduce it from the current 21% down to the 15 to 20% range. Regarding tariffs, an analyst from Columbia Threadneedle Research says, while implementing a broad-based tariff may be challenging, a second Trump administration could impose strategic tariffs, particularly on specific sectors like steel and clean tech. On their face, such measures could be inflationary and could negatively impact the consumer discretionary sector. However, the extent and structure of these tariffs remain uncertain. So it's funny because the rhetoric around tariffs is different. Trump talks about more broad-based tariffs, but in reality, that might not be the situation. Harris talks about more targeted tariffs. And it seems likely that in either outcome, either Harris or Trump would end up implementing targeted tariffs versus broad-based tariffs. On the regulatory side, Trump wants to cut regulations substantially across the board, reduce barriers and approval times for mergers and acquisition, categorize more civil workers as political appointees rather than employees. And you've seen this too recently with Elon Musk, where he's talking about creating this, I don't know if you call it committee, where they look at the efficiency of government and try to cut back on spending, wasteful spending in that area. Trump wants to permanently extend the tax rates that were established in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That would require legislative action to do that. Much of the policy effects, I think the takeaway from both the Trump and the Harris presidency is, especially because your Congress is expected to be divided, they can't push through sweeping changes, is that the main effects of any policy under either administration are going to be felt more at the industry level, specific sectors where you'll have winners and losers, but you're unlikely to have these broad sweeping changes across the entire economy that is likely to impact markets in a bigger way. So yeah, you will have an impact on markets, but it will be at the sector level. Lighter regulation under Trump, that would likely give a boost also to specific industries like energy, financials, the more regulated sectors where things are lightened up there. So again, there are winners and losers under either president, especially with a divided government, unlikely to be broad sweeping changes that are going to have dramatic impacts on both the economy and the markets. So if your person doesn't win, take solace in that likely outcome. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ashley Michike, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.